Team player or nothing, Kyle. My name's Kyle Bennett. I'm 51 years old. Been working at Crestview Technologies for 14 years. Started as a junior accountant. Worked my way up to senior financial analyst. I knew every line item in those quarterly reports better than my own grocery list. That morning in Boise, Idaho, sitting across from my boss, Nathan Carter, I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger recognition. Nathan leaned back in his leather chair, fingers drummed against his oak desk. The corner office with its view of downtown Boise suddenly felt smaller. His words hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody wanted to acknowledge. 3 months of subtle pressure had led to this moment. 3 months of him asking me to massage numbers to find creative interpretations of our manufacturing costs. The board expects growth, he continued. 12% minimum. You know what happens if we don't deliver. I did know. I'd seen it happen to other companies. Stock prices tumbled. Layoffs followed. But I also knew what happened when companies cooked their books. I'd watched Enron collapse when I was younger. Watched good people lose everything because executives decided rules didn't apply to them. I understand your position, I said. He smiled. Relief washed over his face like he'd just solved a difficult puzzle. Good. I knew you'd see reason. Make the adjustments we discussed. Manufacturing efficiency up 8%, overhead cost down 6%, the numbers will work. I nodded. Said nothing about the fact that our manufacturing efficiency had actually dropped 2% last quarter. Said nothing about the overtime costs we'd hidden in consulting fees. Said nothing about the equipment repairs we'd postponed because the budget was already stretched thin. I'll get right on it, I told him. As I walked back to my desk, I passed the break room where my co-workers Emily and Lucas were talking in low voices. They stopped when they saw me. Emily gave me a sympathetic look. Word traveled fast in an office of 60 people. They knew I'd been called in. They probably knew why. I sat down at my computer and stared at the spreadsheet I'd been working on for 2 weeks. Real numbers, accurate numbers. Numbers that told the truth about Crestview Technologies' actual performance. We weren't failing, but we weren't growing either. We were holding steady in a tough market, which should have been good news. My phone buzzed. Text message from my daughter Sarah. Dad, can we still do dinner Friday? Have something to tell you. I typed back, of course. Looking forward to it. I looked at the computer screen again. Nathan's proposed changes stared back at me from my notepad. 8% here, 6% there, small numbers that would make or break careers. The audit was scheduled for next week. I'd been through 3 audits at Crestview Technologies. The first one 7 years ago went smooth as silk. Clean books, honest numbers. Auditors shook hands and left. The second one 4 years back raised a few questions about some consulting fees, but nothing major. We explained everything, provided documentation, moved on. This third audit felt different from the start. 2 months ago, Nathan started asking strange questions during our weekly meetings. What if we reclassified some of these expenses? Could we argue that this equipment depreciation should be spread over 5 years instead of 3? Are we being too conservative with our revenue recognition? At first, I thought he was just being thorough. Nathan had been promoted to Chief Financial Officer 6 months earlier when his predecessor retired. Maybe he wanted to show the board he could squeeze more efficiency out of the department, but the questions kept coming and they kept pushing further into gray areas. I'd known Nathan for 8 years. He'd started as a controller when I was already established as a senior analyst. We'd worked together on dozens of projects. He was smart, detail-oriented, ambitious. I'd even recommended him for the promotion when the CFO position opened up. He'd thanked me, personally, said he wouldn't forget my support. But something changed after he got the corner office. The pressure from above seemed to crush down on him like a physical weight. The board meetings became more intense. The quarterly calls with investors turned into interrogations. And slowly, gradually, Nathan started asking me to help him paint a prettier picture than reality provided. Just shift this expense to next quarter, he'd say. It's not illegal, it's timing. Move this revenue forward, he'd suggest. The contract's already signed. Capitalize this cost instead of expensing it. He'd recommend it provides future benefit. Each request felt reasonable in isolation, but together they formed a pattern I recognized from my accounting classes and from news stories I'd followed over the years. Death by 1,000 cuts. Small compromises that led to big problems. My wife Laura had noticed I was bringing work stress home. "You're quiet at dinner," she'd said last week. "Everything okay?" I'd told her everything was fine, but it wasn't. I'd been losing sleep, checking and rechecking our procedures, reviewing accounting standards I hadn't looked at in years. I kept thinking about my pension, my health care, my daughter's college loans I was still helping with. I thought about the 23 people in our department who trusted me to do things right. The warning signs had been there. Nathan's growing impatience with standard procedures, his frequent mention of what other companies were doing to boost their numbers, his new habit of closing his office door during phone calls. I should have seen this coming. The demotion came 3 hours after our meeting. I was still staring at the spreadsheet, still trying to figure out how to make Nathan's numbers work without crossing lines I wasn't willing to cross, when Emily knocked on my cubicle wall. "Kyle." Her voice was soft. "Careful. Nathan wants to see you again." I walked back to his office. This time, he wasn't alone. Linda Thompson, our human resources director, sat in the chair next to his desk. She gave me a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Kyle, sit down," Nathan said. His earlier friendliness was gone. "We've been discussing your role here at Crestview." I sat, waited. "Your performance has been inconsistent lately," he continued. "Missing deadlines, questioning established procedures, showing resistance to reasonable requests." I started to speak, but he held up his hand. "We're moving you to a new position. Accounts Payable Specialist. You'll report to Lucas. The transition is effective immediately." My chest tightened. Accounts Payable. I'd been doing that job 14 years ago when I first started. It was a demotion disguised as a reassignment, and everyone in the office would know it. "I see," I said. Linda slid a folder across the desk. "New job description, updated salary information, revised reporting structure. Take some time to review everything." I opened the folder. 20% pay cut. Loss of my private office. Loss of my team. Loss of access to the quarterly reports I'd been working on for 3 years. "Any questions?" Nathan asked. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The expensive suit, the confident posture, the way he'd positioned himself behind his desk, like a judge passing sentence. 6 months ago, we'd grabbed lunch together and talked about our kids. He'd asked for my advice about handling the board's expectations. I'd given it freely, thinking we were colleagues working toward the same goals. "No questions," I said. I stood up, shook both their hands, and walked out of his office. The folder felt heavy in my hands. I gathered my personal items from my old desk. Pictures of Laura and Sarah, my coffee mug, a small cactus Sarah had given me for my birthday. Everything fit in a cardboard box I found in the supply closet. My new cubicle was in the back corner of the office next to the printer and the water cooler. Lucas looked embarrassed when I introduced myself as his new team member. He was 28 years old, had been with the company for 3 years. Good kid. This wasn't his fault. I sat down at my new desk and opened my computer. New access levels, new responsibilities, new limitations. I couldn't see the quarterly reports anymore. Couldn't review the audit prep documents. Couldn't access the financial databases I'd been using for years. But I still remembered every number. And the audit was still scheduled for next week. I spent my first day in accounts payable learning how to process invoices and reconcile vendor statements. Work I could do in my sleep. Work that left my mind free to think about what Nathan was really trying to accomplish. By Wednesday, I'd figured out his pattern. The manufacturing efficiency numbers he wanted me to change weren't just optimistic. They were impossible. We'd have needed to replace half our equipment and retrain our entire workforce to achieve those gains. The overhead reductions he demanded would require cutting essential maintenance and safety inspections. During my lunch break, I walked to the Boise Public Library, used their computers to research recent SEC enforcement actions against companies that had manipulated financial statements. The fines were massive. The executives went to prison. The employees lost their jobs and pensions. That afternoon, I made a decision. I waited until most people had left the office, then knocked on Nathan's door. He was still there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, working late like he always did. "Kyle, what's up? I've been thinking about our conversation Monday about the quarterly reports." He leaned back in his chair. "Good. I was hoping you'd come around." "Did you make the adjustments?" No, I said. I can't do it, Nathan. The numbers you want aren't just optimistic, they're false. His expression hardened. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. Manufacturing efficiency didn't improve 8% last quarter. It dropped 2%. I have the production reports to prove it. Production reports can be interpreted different ways, not this way. Not honestly. We stared at each other across his desk. The office was quiet, except for the hum of computers and the distant sound of traffic on Main Street. Kyle, he said finally, I think you're forgetting something. You work for me. You do what I tell you to do. I work for Crestview Technologies. I have a responsibility to the shareholders, to the employees. To you have a responsibility to follow orders. His voice was getting louder. That's what they pay you for. They pay me to be an accountant to provide accurate financial information. They pay you to be whatever I need you to be. He stood up, walked around his desk, and right now I need you to stop being a pain in my ass and start being a team player. I thought about my pension, my health care, Sarah's student loans, Laura's plans for retirement. All of it tied to this job, this company, this man standing in front of me. I understand, I said. Relief flickered across his face again. Good. I understand that you're asking me to commit fraud. The relief vanished. His face flushed red. Get out of my office. Nathan, get out. I left, walked back to my cubicle, sat down and stared at my computer screen. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anger, from the realization that 14 years of trust and mutual respect had just evaporated in the space of 5 minutes. Thursday morning, I found an email in my inbox from Linda in Human Resources. Performance review meeting Friday 9 a.m. mandatory attendance. I spent Thursday processing invoices and thinking about my options. I could quit, walk away, find another job, pretend none of this had happened. I could go along with Nathan's plan, keep my head down, make the changes, hope the auditors didn't dig too deep, or I could do something else. Friday morning, I sat across from Linda and Nathan in the conference room. They'd prepared a performance improvement plan. 90 days to show significant improvement in attitude and cooperation. Failure to meet expectations would result in termination. Any questions, Linda asked. Just one, I said. When exactly is the audit scheduled to begin? Nathan's jaw tightened. Monday. Why, just curious, I said. I signed the performance improvement plan, shook their hands, went back to my cubicle, and opened a new email. The auditor's name was Michael Lee. I'd found his email address on the Thompson Price & Associates website. Senior partner specialized in financial statement audits. 23 years of experience. I'd worked with his firm during our previous audits. Professional, thorough, no nonsense. My email was simple. Michael Kyle Bennett at Crestview Technologies. Could we meet for coffee before the audit begins Monday? I have some concerns about the quarterly reports that I think you should know about. I sent it Friday at 5:30 p.m. after everyone else had left the office. Saturday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number with a Seattle area code. Kyle, this is Michael Lee. I got your email. Thanks for calling. What kind of concerns are we talking about? I told him. Not everything, not specific numbers, but enough manufacturing efficiency claims that couldn't be substantiated, overhead reductions that existed only on paper, revenue recognition that pushed the boundaries of acceptable practice. These are serious allegations, he said. They're not allegations, they're facts. I can prove everything I'm telling you. We agreed to meet Sunday afternoon at a coffee shop in downtown Boise. Neutral ground, away from the office, away from anyone who might recognize us. Sunday morning, I went to church with Laura like I did every week. Sat in the same pew we'd occupied for 8 years. Listened to Pastor Johnson talk about integrity and moral courage. Laura squeezed my hand during the sermon. She didn't know what was happening at work, but she knew something was bothering me. You okay? She whispered. I will be, I whispered back. The coffee shop was crowded with college students and young professionals. Michael Lee was waiting in a corner booth, laptop open, reading glasses perched on his nose. I recognized him from our previous audits. Mid-50s, gray hair, serious expression. He looked like a man who'd seen every trick in the book. Kyle, he said, standing up to shake my hand. Thanks for reaching out. I sat down across from him, ordered coffee, tried to figure out how to begin. Let me ask you something. He said, how long have you been at Crestview? 14 years. Good employee, good performance reviews. Until this week. Yes. He nodded. Tell me about this week. I told him about the demotion, about Nathan's pressure to falsify the reports, about the performance improvement plan, and the threat of termination. I kept my voice low, professional, factual. Do you have documentation? He asked. Some email exchanges, draft reports, production data that contradicts the official numbers. Are you willing to provide that documentation during the audit? Yes. He studied me for a long moment. Kyle, you understand what this means. If what you're telling me is true, this isn't just an accounting issue. This is potential securities fraud. I understand. Your CFO will likely lose his job. You might lose yours too. Companies don't like whistleblowers, even when they're right. I know. Then why are you doing this? I thought about Sarah, about the student loan she was paying off, about the job she'd found at a small accounting firm in Seattle. I thought about the young employees at Crestview who trusted the company to be honest with them about their future. I thought about the investors who relied on our financial statements to make decisions about their retirement savings. Because it's the right thing to do, I said. Michael nodded, closed his laptop. The audit starts at 8 a.m. Monday. We'll be requesting all quarterly documentation, including draft reports and supporting data. Make sure you're available to answer questions. We shook hands. I walked back to my car, drove home to Laura, and spent the rest of Sunday afternoon preparing for what was coming. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Typical October weather in Boise. I got to the office early, sat at my new cubicle, and watched the auditors arrive. Michael Lee led a team of 4 people, 2 senior auditors and 2 staff assistants. They set up in the conference room with boxes of documents and laptops. Nathan greeted them personally, all smiles and professional courtesy. Gentlemen, ladies, welcome back to Crestview. I think you'll find everything in order this year. I'm sure we will, Michael replied. His eyes found mine across the office for just a moment. The first day of an audit always followed the same pattern. The auditors requested specific documents, reviewed basic financial statements, asked preliminary questions about accounting procedures. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would set off alarm bells, but I noticed things. The way Michael's team spent extra time reviewing our manufacturing cost reports. The questions they asked about revenue recognition, timing the requests for supporting documentation that went beyond what they had asked for in previous audits. Tuesday, things got more interesting. Kyle Lucas said, walking over to my cubicle around 10 a.m., "The auditors want to see you in the conference room." I walked over, knocked on the door. Michael looked up from a stack of papers. "Kyle, come in. We have some questions about the quarterly reports." I sat down. 2 of his team members had laptops open, spreadsheets visible on their screens. "We are seeing some inconsistencies between the draft reports and the final versions," Michael said. "Significant changes in manufacturing efficiency numbers. Can you help us understand what happened? I can try." He slid a document across the table. My original draft report, the one with the real numbers, next to it, the final version that Nathan had submitted. The differences were stark. "These are substantial revisions," Michael continued. "Who authorized these changes?" Nathan Carter, the CFO. "And did you agree with these changes?" I looked around the room. 3 auditors staring at me, waiting for my answer. Through the conference room window, I could see Nathan at his desk talking on the phone. "No," I said. I didn't agree with them. "Why not?" "Because they weren't accurate." Michael nodded, made a note on his legal pad. "Can you provide us with the supporting documentation for your original numbers?" "Yes." Over the next 2 hours, I walked them through everything. Production reports that showed actual manufacturing efficiency, overtime costs that had been reclassified as consulting expenses, equipment maintenance, that had been deferred to inflate short-term profits, revenue from contracts that wouldn't be completed for another 6 months. "This is very helpful," Michael said when we finished. "We'll need formal statements from you about all of this. Whatever you need." I left the conference room and went back to my cubicle. Nathan's office door was closed, but I could see him through the window, pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling his attorney. Wednesday morning, I found Linda from Human Resources waiting at my desk. "Kyle, I need to speak with you privately." We walked to her office. She closed the door, sat down behind her desk with a folder in front of her. "I'm conducting an investigation into some allegations that have come to light during the audit," she said. "I need to ask you some questions." "Okay. Did you provide confidential company information to outside parties without authorization? I provided accurate financial information to auditors who are authorized to review our books. Did you make false statements about company management? I made truthful statements about requests I was asked to fulfill. She made notes, asked more questions, tried to trap me in contradictions, but there weren't any contradictions, just facts. Thursday, the trap snapped shut. Friday morning, I arrived at work to find the parking lot half empty. Word had spread fast. 3 senior executives had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Nathan's office was dark, his computer seized by investigators. Michael Lee found me at my cubicle around 10 a.m. Kyle, we need you in the conference room for a final interview. This time, there were more people present. Michael and his audit team, plus 2 investigators from the Securities and Exchange Commission. They'd flown up from Chicago overnight. Mr. Bennett, the lead investigator, said, "We understand you've been cooperating with this investigation." "Yes, sir. We are prepared to offer you whistleblower protection under federal law. Your employment and pension are protected. You'll also be eligible for a financial reward if criminal charges are filed." I nodded. Thought about Laura, about Sarah, about all the sleepless nights I'd spent worrying about our future. "What happens to the company?" I asked. "That depends on how extensive the fraud turns out to be. We're still investigating." The investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, I continued working in accounts payable, processing invoices, staying quiet. Nathan was terminated for cause. 2 other executives were let go. The board hired a new CFO from outside the company. The SEC announced their findings in December. Crestview Technologies agreed to pay a $2 million fine for financial statement fraud. No criminal charges were filed, but several executives were barred from working in public companies for 5 years. My whistleblower reward was substantial enough to pay off the rest of Sarah's student loans and add 10 years to our retirement savings. The new CFO offered me my old job back in January. Senior Financial Analyst, full salary restoration corner office. I thanked her and declined. I'd been promoted to controller, instead a position that came with more responsibility and more authority to ensure our books stayed clean. Nathan found work at a small private company in Seattle. No more corner office, no more expense account, no more board meetings. His reputation in the finance community was finished. Linda left for a position in Oregon. The other executives involved in the scheme struggled to find new positions. I kept my head down and did my job, trained new employees on proper accounting procedures, worked with our auditors to establish stronger internal controls, made sure what happened with Nathan could never happen again. Sarah graduated from college debt-free and started her career without the financial pressure I'd worried about. Laura and I took a vacation to Montana that summer. Our first real vacation in 5 years. We rented a cabin by the lake, read books, walked in the mountains, talked about our plans for retirement. "You did the right thing," she told me one evening as we watched the sunset. I know it wasn't easy. No, I said it wasn't, but it was necessary. Companies fail when good people stay silent. Employees suffer when executives put profits ahead of principles. I'd spent 14 years building trust and relationships at Crestview Technologies. I wasn't going to watch one man's greed destroy everything we'd worked for. The most important lesson I learned was simple. Integrity isn't negotiable. You either have it or you don't. And once you compromise it, everything else becomes just another transaction waiting to go wrong. Sometimes the right choice is also the hardest choice, but it's still the only choice worth making. Kyle Bennett learned that integrity is non-negotiable, a fundamental principle that defines one's character and actions. Through his experience at Crestview Technologies, he realized that compromising ethical standards leads to a cascade of consequences, jeopardizing trust and relationships built over years. Choosing to expose the truth despite personal risks reinforced his belief that doing the right thing, though difficult, is the only path worth taking. His decision to prioritize honesty over compliance protected the company's employees and investors, proving that moral courage outweighs short-term gains and preserves long-term stability. Integrity, he concluded, is the bedrock of meaningful success.